the busy but also quiet roads of the United States, where construction sites punctuate the landscape all summer long, a chilling urban legend haunts the streets. Those who have heard the stories get shivers down their spines when traveling in unknown areas on summer nights. This is the story of 4 men, shadows in the night, who prey on unsuspecting travelers. Their sinister operations leave a trail of missing persons, desolation, unanswered questions, and simply pure evil. Now, let us take a slow walk down the dark, empty roads and find the Night Shifters. The first recorded incident happened one July night in 1978. Linda Williams was exhausted. Her double shift at the hospital had drained her energy, leaving her eager to get home and collapse into bed. It was close to midnight when she finally clocked out, and the drive back to her suburban neighborhood seemed to stretch on forever. The dark, winding roads were eerily quiet, with only the occasional streetlight breaking through the darkness. As she drove, she turned on the radio, hoping some music would help keep her alert. The road ahead was lined with orange cones and flashing lights, signaling a construction zone. Linda sighed, thinking about the inevitable detour that would add more time to her already long night. She slowed her car as she approached the site, noticing one man in a reflective vest waving her down. The other 3 seemed busy, moving equipment and setting up barriers. "Great, just what I need," Linda muttered to herself, rolling down her window as she pulled to a stop. The man closest, tall and muscular with a friendly demeanor and holding a stop sign, approached her car. His vest was smeared with dirt, and his hard hat cast a shadow over his face. As he leaned closer, the light from her headlights caught something on his forearm, a tattoo. It was a strange, almost hypnotic design, an intricate web of dark lines and shapes that seemed to move and shift as he extended his arm. "Evening, ma'am. We're doing some emergency repairs on the road. I'm going to need you to wait, or take a detour," he said, pointing to a gravel side road that led away from the main blacktop street. Linda nodded, glancing around the site. The men seemed focused on their work, but something felt off. Her eyes were drawn to the heavy swinging door of a large dump truck parked at the far edge of the site. It wasn't unusual to see heavy machinery at a construction zone, but this truck had a massive blue tarp draped over something in the back. As she squinted to get a better look, she noticed movement under the tarp. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw what looked like a human hand briefly emerge from beneath the cover. Panic surged through her veins as her mind raced to make sense of what she was seeing. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" the worker asked, noticing her distracted state. Linda's gaze flickered back to his tattoo, which now seemed even more sinister. The dark lines twisted into a macabre pattern, almost as if they were alive. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the man was watching her closely, his friendly demeanor now feeling like a mask. She glanced around nervously and noticed another worker heading towards a front loader parked nearby. The man climbed into the cab, started the engine, and began backing it up slowly, the reverse lights and alarm blaring in her mind. Linda's heart pounded faster as she realized that if the front loader blocked the gravel road, her escape route would be cut off. Linda forced a smile, trying to appear calm. "Yes, thank you. I'll take the detour." She rolled up her window, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. The men had resumed their work, but now she could see them exchanging glances, their movements more hurried and tense. Her intuition screamed at her to get out of there. Without another thought, Linda slammed her foot on the gas pedal. Her car lurched forward, tires screeching against the asphalt. Pulling the steering wheel hard right, she almost lost control when the tires hit the gravel. The front loader appeared to speed up in reverse, barely missing the back of her car by inches. In her rearview mirror, she saw the men scramble, 2 of them running towards a nearby vehicle. Her heart pounded as she navigated the narrow detour road, praying she wouldn't encounter any obstacles. The road twisted and turned, the dark woods on either side closing in on her. After what felt like an eternity, Linda reached the main highway. She didn't stop until she was several miles away, pulling into a brightly lit gas station. Her hands shook as she dialed 911, recounting her terrifying encounter to the dispatcher. By the time the police arrived at the construction site, it was quiet. The dump truck and the men had all vanished, leaving no evidence behind. Only the construction site that had been there for 2 weeks while city crews worked on sewage lines. Linda's story was met with skepticism, but the fear in her eyes was undeniable. She had escaped a fate too horrifying to imagine, and her account would become the first in a series of chilling reports that would form the basis of the urban legend, named by a detective in Oklahoma, the Night Shifters. Jack and Emily Thompson were returning from a weekend getaway, the memory of their relaxing trip still fresh in their minds. It was August 1981, and they were a few hundred miles from home, driving through a remote area far from the bustling city they had left behind. The road was dark and deserted, flanked by dense woods on either side. The occasional deer crossing the road was the only sign of life. As they drove, the couple chatted about their plans for the week ahead. They were nearing a bend in the road when they noticed the flashing lights and reflective cones of a construction site ahead. Jack slowed the car, prepared to stop, as they approached the apparent roadwork. The scene before them was unexpected. A sprawling construction site took over the road, illuminated by harsh, artificial lights that cast long shadows across the asphalt. 4 men in reflective vests moved with purpose, setting up barriers and operating heavy machinery. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and freshly turned earth, a stark contrast to the otherwise silent and desolate surroundings. Jack rolled down his window as they came to a stop. The nearest worker, a tall, muscular man with a friendly yet unsettling demeanor, approached the car. His vest was smeared with dirt, and his hard hat cast a shadow over his face. As he leaned closer, the light from the car's headlights caught something on his forearm. A tattoo. It was an intricate, almost hypnotic design of a grinning skull with hollow eyes, the dark lines appearing to move and shift as the man extended his arm. "Good evening," the man said, his voice gravelly but polite. "We're doing some emergency repairs on the road. I'm going to need you to take a detour." He pointed to a narrow road that led away from the main highway, disappearing into the darkness. Another construction worker was moving an excavator forward, revealing the side road. Jack glanced at Emily, who nodded, though her eyes were wide with unease. "Sure, no problem," he replied, forcing a smile. As Jack prepared for the excavator to clear the road and drive away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He decided to engage the man in conversation. "It's pretty late for road work, isn't it? And, out here in the middle of nowhere?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light and casual. The worker's grin widened, exposing his yellowed teeth. "You'd be surprised how much gets done when there's no prying eyes around," he replied cryptically. "We like to keep things quiet." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. The man's words hung heavy in the air, filled with an unsettling implication. Trying to distract himself, Jack's eyes wandered back to the worker's tattoo. "Interesting tattoo," he remarked. "So, what's it mean?" The worker glanced at his tattoo, then back at Jack, his eyes cold and unfeeling. "It's a reminder," he said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "A reminder that sometimes it's better not to ask too many questions." Emily, sitting beside Jack, shivered as she listened to the exchange. Her eyes darted around the site, taking in the details, the heavy machinery, the scattered tools, and the other workers who seemed to be avoiding their gaze. Her attention was drawn to several dark construction holes dotting the area, large and ominous. Her breath caught in her throat when she thought she saw a woman's head start to emerge from one of the holes, directly in front of the moving excavator. The sight was horrifying. The woman's eyes were wide with terror, her mouth moving as if to scream. Emily's grip tightened on Jack's arm, her nails digging into his skin. Before Emily could react, the excavator bucket extended out, striking the woman and knocking her back into the hole. Emily gasped, her voice a whisper of terror. "Jack, we need to go." Jack looked at Emily, seeing the fear in her eyes. He followed her gaze and saw the workers now moving with a sense of urgency, their glances becoming more menacing. To their right, a random car was parked off the road in the grass. It looked abandoned, with camping gear strewn inside and out, adding to the surreal horror of the scene. Understanding the danger, Jack nodded to Emily. He forced a smile at the worker and said, "Thanks for the heads up. We'll take the detour." As soon as the worker stepped back, Jack rolled up the window and floored the accelerator. The tires spun on some loose gravel, causing the car to fishtail. For a moment, it seemed like they might regain control, but the car skidded uncontrollably, crashing into the back of a dump truck, parked opposite of the moving excavator. The impact was jarring, pinning the car under the truck's frame. Dazed and disoriented, Jack and Emily tried to collect themselves. Through the cracked windshield, they saw the three men slowly putting down their tools, and the fourth now backing the massive excavator directly towards their undrivable car. Their expressions were cold and calculating as the three began walking towards the wrecked car. In a panic, Jack and Emily realized they had no time to waste. "We have to get out of here now!" Jack shouted. They both scrambled out of the car, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. In their haste, they left their belongings behind, only thinking of their immediate survival. The men in the loud scraping excavator were getting closer, their pace deliberate and menacing. Jack grabbed Emily's hand, and they sprinted towards the nearest cornfield, the tall stalks offering a potential escape route. The thick, rustling plants quickly enveloped them, but the darkness made it difficult to navigate. They ran blindly, the fear of the unknown propelling them forward. The sounds of pursuit, crunching leaves and heavy footsteps, echoed through the cornfield. Jack and Emily's breaths came in ragged gasps as they pushed deeper into the maze of corn, praying they wouldn't trip or run into a dead end. The moonlight filtered through the corn stalks, casting eerie shadows that danced around them. Every rustle and crack seemed amplified in the silence of the night. Jack and Emily's feet pounded the ground as they sprinted through the field, their minds racing with thoughts of the men pursuing them. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Jack's hand as a cornstalk cut into his skin. Instinctively, he let go of Emily's hand. He continued running for a few more steps before realizing she was no longer beside him. He turned around, his heart pounding with fear, and called out for Emily. His voice seemed swallowed by the endless rows of corn. Panic surged through him as he desperately searched for any sign of her. Two blood-curdling female screams echoed through the night, sending a chill down Jack's spine. His heart sank, realizing the dire situation. Jack turned and ran back towards her last known location. He spotted a faint trail of blood on the ground, leading back towards the construction site. His mind raced with horrifying possibilities. As he followed the trail, his anxiety grew. Suddenly, he saw two reflective vests moving through the corn towards him. The sight sent a jolt of fear through him, and he knew he had to run. He ran for what felt like 500 yards. Jack burst out of the cornfield and stumbled onto a dirt road. In a desperate bid to avoid detection, he threw himself into a ditch across from the cornfield, watching in cautious silence as the two vests moved closer. He held his breath, praying they wouldn't see him. The men scanned the area briefly before continuing their search further into the cornfield. He swore in his police statement that their eyes were glowing red. Jack took the moment to gather his wits. He scanned the area for any signs of civilization. In the distance, he saw the faint glow of a farmhouse. With renewed hope, he started running again, his legs burning from exertion. As he ran, he prayed that Emily was safe, that he would find her soon. When Jack finally reached the farmhouse, he pounded on the door, desperate for someone to answer. An elderly couple opened the door, their faces filled with concern as they took in Jack's disheveled appearance. Please, I need help, Jack gasped. My wife, she's missing. They're men, they tried to... The couple ushered him inside, locking the door behind them. As Jack recounted his terrifying ordeal, the elderly man called the police, his hands shaking. The authorities arrived quickly, taking his story seriously. The police conducted a thorough search of the construction site and the surrounding area. To their disbelief, they found no evidence of the men, the car full of camping gear, or even Jack's car. It was as if the entire scene had been meticulously wiped clean, just a normal construction site that had been clogging up the right lane on State Road 27 for almost the entire month of August for drainage repairs. The lack of physical evidence made Jack's account difficult to verify, leaving the authorities puzzled and skeptical. Every worker that had been on the site in the past weeks was checked out and accounted for. As days passed with no new leads or evidence, the police began to suspect that Jack might have fabricated the entire incident. The theory emerged that he could have done something sinister to Emily and concocted this elaborate tale to cover it up. His frantic demeanor and the bizarre nature of his account only fueled their suspicions. Detectives delved into Jack's background, looking for any signs of a troubled marriage or motives for harming Emily. They interviewed friends and family, scrutinized his behavior in the days leading up to the incident, and searched for any inconsistencies in his story. Jack found himself under intense scrutiny. The police questioned him repeatedly, their tone becoming more accusing with each interrogation. They searched his home, looking for any evidence that might suggest foul play. The media caught wind of the case, and Jack's life became a nightmare of public suspicion and private anguish. Despite his efforts, the case against Jack grew stronger. Prosecutors painted a damning picture of a husband who had plotted to get rid of his wife and crafted an elaborate story to cover his tracks. The lack of physical evidence only worked against him, suggesting meticulous planning and execution. The trial continued. Jack sat in the courtroom, feeling the weight of every eye on him. Witnesses were called, experts testified, and the prosecution laid out their case with clinical precision. Jack's defense struggled to counter the narrative, hampered by the absence of concrete evidence to support his story. In the end, the jury found Jack guilty of Emily's murder. The verdict was a crushing blow. Jack stood, shackled, as the judge handed down the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs, and the media outside reported the news with a mixture of shock and satisfaction. Jack's conviction only deepened the mystery surrounding Emily's disappearance. He was taken away, maintaining his innocence to the last, a haunted look in his eyes. His insistence on the existence of the night shifters was dismissed as the desperate delusions of a guilty man. This harrowing encounter added another dark chapter to the legend of the night shifters. The eerie tattoos, the cryptic conversations, and the brutal violence witnessed by Jack and Emily underscored the ruthlessness of the men who hid behind the trust of construction workers. Their experience, though deeply traumatic, served as a crucial piece of the puzzle, helping others to understand the true danger lurking on the dark, lonely roads at night. Yet, with Jack's conviction, the truth seemed further away than ever, leaving a lingering sense of unease and unanswered questions in the minds of those who followed the case. In 1999, a young woman named Jessica Thompson experienced a terrifying encounter on a lonely road in Ohio. It was late at night, and Jessica was returning from a weekend visit to her parents. As she neared a stretch of road marked for construction, she saw the familiar red stop sign and a man with a yellow safety vest that shimmered in her car's headlights. Jessica slowed to a stop and rolled down her window, peering through the darkness at the men pretending to work. The scene was surreal. The area was dimly lit by a few scattered construction lights casting long, eerie shadows. Piles of dirt and gravel were heaped up on either side of the road, and heavy machinery stood like silent sentinels in the background. Cones and barricades created a maze-like path through the site, and the air smelled faintly of earth and metal. As she waited, her eyes wandered over the scene. She noticed that the construction equipment, while new and in good shape, seemed out of place in the quiet night. The construction signs were battered and barely readable, adding to the sense of unease. One of the men was dragging a tarp across an open pit, working methodically as if burying debris. Jessica thought little of it until she noticed something unusual at the edge of the tarp. Her breathing stopped when she realized it looked like a tennis shoe, partially hidden but unmistakably attached to something down in the hole. Fear began to creep in, her instincts screaming that something was terribly wrong. She took a deep breath and decided to speak to the man holding the stop sign. Is there another way I can go?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man stepped closer, his face partially hidden under the brim of his hard hat. "Road's closed for just a bit," he replied, his voice low and unnervingly calm. "You'll just have to wait here until we clear it." Jessica noticed the serpent tattoo on his forearm, the scales intricately detailed and almost lifelike. "How long will it take?" she asked, her unease growing. He smirked, his eyes glinting with a predatory light. "Not long. You should just stay in your car and keep the doors locked. It's safer that way." A chill ran down her spine. "Safer?" she echoed, her heart beginning to race. "A lot of wild animals around here," he said, his smile widening to reveal crooked yellow teeth. "Wouldn't want you to get hurt." Just then, the man by the pit looked up and noticed Jessica watching him. His eyes narrowed, and he pointed directly at her, yelling something incomprehensible but filled with menace. The man holding the stop sign flashed her an evil smile, and she saw another construction worker start moving toward her passenger door. Panic surged through Jessica as she saw the man with the stop sign reach out, almost within arm's reach of her car. His fingers grazed the window edge, and his malevolent grin widened. Jessica's breath caught in her throat as she fumbled with the gear shift, her hands trembling. She glanced to her right and saw the other worker advancing rapidly, his eyes locked on her with predatory intent. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jessica yanked the gear shifter into reverse. The tires screeched as the car lurched backwards. The man at the passenger door quickened his pace, his expression darkening. She slammed the transmission into first gear, and just as Jessica floored the gas pedal to swerve around him, the side mirror struck the man with the stop sign. To her horror, the mirror shattered against his body, but he didn't move an inch. Instead, he started to laugh, a deep, chilling sound that filled the night air and sent shivers down her spine. The broken pieces of mirror clattered to the ground as she swerved the car, narrowly missing the other man. Jessica's heart pounded as she wrestled the car into the left lane around the barricades, the speedometer climbing rapidly. She could hear the distant shouts of the men behind her, but she didn't dare look back. The car fishtailed briefly, but she regained control, her mind racing with fear and adrenaline. In her panic, she lost control of the car and careened into a large flatbed trailer parked at the far end of the construction site. The impact was jarring, her car crumpling against the heavy steel frame, but she managed to unbuckle her seatbelt and scramble out of the wreckage. As she stumbled out of the car, dazed and bleeding from a gash on her forehead, she saw another car approaching the stop sign behind her. The construction workers shifted their attention to the new arrival, giving Jessica a fleeting chance to escape. She took off running, her breath ragged and her heart pounding in her chest. After what felt like an eternity, she saw the faint glow of lights in the distance, a gas station. Her legs ached and her lungs burned, but she didn't stop until she reached the top of the hill. Panting heavily, she risked a glance back. What she saw made her blood run cold. The men were pulling two girls out of the car that had stopped while she was trying to get away. The girls were screaming, their voices piercing the night air and sending a chill down Jessica's spine. The sinister figures dragged them towards the open pit, their struggles futile against the overpowering strength of the beings in safety vests. Jessica turned and ran harder, tears streaming down her face as the screams echoed in her ears. She felt a desperate urgency to reach safety and to get help, knowing that time was running out for the girls she had left behind. Finally, she reached the gas station, bursting through the door and startling the clerk who was working the night shift. "Help me, please! Call the police!" she gasped, collapsing onto the counter. The clerk quickly dialed 911 as Jessica tried to catch her breath, her body trembling with fear and exhaustion. When the police arrived, Jessica recounted her ordeal in frantic detail. Officers were dispatched to the construction site, but by the time they arrived, the workers had vanished. There was no sign of the vehicles, men, or two females she had seen. Her car was found smashed against the flatbed trailer, but no other evidence was discovered. Police started an investigation, but quickly turned their sights on Jessica for driving under the influence and making up a wild tale to take the scope off of her crashing her car in a construction zone. Despite the lack of physical proof, Jessica's story spread quickly, adding to the growing fear of the night shifters. In 2007, Mark Davidson, a seasoned truck driver, was hauling freight across Idaho when he encountered the night shifters. Mark was used to long, solitary drives and had heard the rumors about the night shifters, but he never believed them until that night. It was around midnight when Mark saw the construction signs and the red stop signal. A man with a raven tattoo waved him down. Mark hesitated but eventually pulled over, thinking it was just another routine stop. As he waited, he noticed the odd placement of equipment and the absence of noise. When the man with the stop sign didn't approach, Mark decided to investigate. He climbed out of his truck and walked towards the workers, noticing the eerie tattoos and the strange silence. Then he saw it, a pit covered with a tarp, and faint, muffled cries coming from beneath. Fear seized him, and he sprinted back to his truck, slamming the door shut and speeding away. He reported the sight to the police, but like the others, they found nothing. Mark's encounter spread quickly, adding to the growing fear of the night shifters. Not everyone was as fortunate as Sarah, Jessica, or Mark. Over the years, several people disappeared under mysterious circumstances near construction sites. In 1992, a college student named Brian Miller went missing on his way home from a party. His car was found abandoned near a construction site, but Brian was never seen again. In 2000, a young couple, Ryan and Tabitha, vanished during a road trip. Their last known location was near a construction zone in rural New Mexico. Weeks later, their bodies were discovered in a shallow grave, with their car hidden under a tarp in the back of a dump truck miles away. The most recent case was in 2019, when a businessman named Robert Harris disappeared while driving to a conference. His body was found months later in a pit covered with a tarp, his car parked nearby. Further investigation showed the vehicle had been picked up and moved with a large front loader bucket. As the years passed, more stories surfaced about the night shifters. People began to avoid driving alone at night near construction sites, The legend grew, fueled by the chilling tales of those who barely escaped and the haunting memories of those who didn't. The tattoos became a symbol of terror, each design a grim reminder of the men who lurked in the shadows. Various theories emerged about the Night Shifters. Some believed they were part of a cult, using construction sites as a cover for their dark rituals. Others thought they were a group of deranged serial killers, roaming the country and preying on unsuspecting travelers. A few small groups believed they were the spirits of 4 construction workers killed in a construction zone one night and back for revenge. Conspiracy theorists speculated that the Night Shifters were involved in human trafficking, using the sites to abduct and transport their victims. Despite numerous investigations, no conclusive evidence was ever found, leaving the truth shrouded in mystery. While some victim stories were known, many more were never found. Countless families were left in anguish, their loved ones disappearing without a trace. The Night Shifters became a symbol of dread, an urban legend that reminded everyone of the darkness lurking just beyond the edge of their headlights. In recent years, sightings of the Night Shifters have become less frequent, but the fear remains. People still talk about them in hushed tones, warning each other to be vigilant when approaching a construction site at night on lonely roads. The legend persists, a chilling reminder of the terror that once gripped the nation. The Night Shifters are more than just an urban legend. They are a manifestation of our deepest fears. Their story is a cautionary tale about the dangers that lurk in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. Whether they are real or simply a figment of our collective imagination, the Night Shifters will continue to haunt the roads and construction sites of America, a dark and terrifying presence in the shadows. So, this summer when driving after the sun hides behind the world, be cautious of any road construction zones. It could be the last stop you ever make.